If you've reached the intermediate level in a new language, fantastic. Your language skills are good enough to get by in most situations. But if you stop studying now, you are taking a big risk. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why you're taking a big risk if you stop improving after the intermediate level, and some techniques to move from intermediate to advanced. Oh, and you're also going to meet some of the story learning team too and hear what their secrets are.
C'était très intéressant de voir leur style de vie et aussi qu'est-ce qu'ils font dans leur vie.
Okay, so you feel pretty confident in your new language. You know the main grammar rules, you can understand a lot of what you read in books or hear in movies. You can even survive a conversation with a complete stranger at the pub. And you should be really, really proud of yourself. Most people never make it this far. But there's a danger. You see, despite all your hard work and progress, it's still possible to forget the language if you don't keep it up. Now, as most experienced language learners will tell you, it's only once you've learned a language to an upper intermediate or advanced level that there's no longer any risk of forgetting it, even after years, because that's the level where the language seems to get drilled in and imprinted on your brain. So that alone is a good reason to keep improving past intermediate level. And then there's this.
As soon as you stop noticing your progress, you are probably in the intermediate plateau. Okay. So if you keep going and you have the impression that you're not making much progress, that's probably because you are in the intermediate plateau. My best tip to get out of the intermediate plateau would be to stop doing always the same thing. I mean, if you want to change things up and to get to the advanced level, you need to start doing things differently compared to what you have been doing it so far, like from beginner to intermediate.
The intermediate plateau is a real pain because it can be very hard to see where you're making progress. And if you don't keep improving...
Anyway, it's been 2 years. I mean, isn't there like a statute of limitations on that?
Statute. What? Statute of limitations. It's not a statue.
Mistakes really can get stuck in your brain.
The most important thing when it comes to reaching an advanced level, getting through that intermediate plateau is consistency, as is with, advancing from any level to the next. But also focusing on getting out of your comfort zone. I think once somebody gets to the intermediate level, they've gotten into a routine that they're comfortable with. They do the same things, and that consistency in that routine has gotten them up to that point. And you reach a point where that isn't difficult enough anymore. So you need to push yourself, just like anything else. If you want to get good at anything, you need to be a little bit uncomfortable to see progress. And if that means not watching movies with subtitles in your language so that you're understanding everything that happens, or series or whatever, it could mean that. It could mean having more interactions with native speakers. It could mean using more native content, because maybe some students get comfortable using graded content or adapted content for learners, and really kind of, I guess, using more native content would really help.
The first thing to get into your head is that you're going to need a massive amount of input, reading and listening. And I mean way more than before. If you want to keep improving, this is full-on dedication time. You need to expand your vocabulary, deepen and extend your knowledge and use of grammar, learn more native-like expressions. And the only way this is going to happen is if you're using the language every single day consistently until it's just second nature.
My love for certain languages is so powerful, so strong, that I want to go deeper and deeper, as deep as possible in my knowledge of that language.
I think writing is super powerful. I think that's a great activity, because you can be, I often explain it to my students, like you're like you can be like a mad scientist without anybody judging you, right? Because you don't have anybody waiting for you to deliver a message, to speak to them. Nobody's there looking at you, waiting for you to say something. So then you have this kind of calm situation where you can play around with the sentence structure. You can think, okay, this expression, I want to say it like this in English. or whatever your native language is. And how could I say that in the language I'm learning? Maybe look it up, see if you can find something similar, or, you know, looking for synonyms at the advanced level. Finding synonyms is very important, so you're not repeating the same thing over and over again. And you can see that in your writing. You can't see that in your speech because you're just kind of throwing it out, right? You're just, whatever comes to your mind, the fastest thing comes out, the easiest thing. So when you're writing, you can just play around with the language and really, you know, I think it's a really good activity.
I could not agree more. There is no performance pressure with writing either. So it makes a superb way to show up gaps in what you can express and whether you've really internalized the grammar. And get creative too. Write down interesting scenarios or reactions to things that you see. This will give you a chance to express yourself in ways that you wouldn't when you're just casually speaking, because you'll have the time and space to dig out all of that passive vocabulary that you're sitting on.
So something that's really helped me get from intermediate through to advanced levels in languages is reading. And I think reading is really, really important because it allows you to get a lot of exposure to the language, to pick up lots and lots of vocabulary, some of which you'll end up being able to use actively, other vocabulary which you'll just end up learning how to recognize passively. But it gives you a lot of exposure to that, and also to lots of different grammar forms in context. And the reason I like reading is that it's extremely difficult to get enough exposure to the language to reach really high levels if you're just dependent on practicing by speaking with people. And so reading is a great way around that. You can improve really quickly by reading a lot. It's a lot of fun as well. And it can be challenging, but it's also something that you can kind of scale up. You can start with things that are easier and gradually work up to harder and harder texts. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important element of reaching higher levels.
So this one all comes down to what you do and don't get out of your conversations with people. Thing is, as great and essential as speaking is, you need to be challenged if you want to advance. So the question becomes, how much are people really challenging you? Because honestly, most people use a pretty limited range of words in everyday conversation. And reading books written for native speakers, that adults, not kids, will give you a ton of advanced vocabulary that you won't hear commonly in daily conversation. But here's the thing. The reason you can't just avoid it all, native speakers do know these words. They might not use them, but they know them. So one day you're sitting at dinner and they start talking about brilliant ways to save the planet. Can you hold your own in this conversation? Do you have the vocabulary to join in? There is a little caveat here that we'll come back to in just a moment. Picture this, you've learned 5 new words that mean kind of the same thing, and now you want to sound more creative when you speak. Brilliant, you can choose from your list of synonyms. Only problem is, there will be subtle differences in the meanings, and it's a common mistake with intermediate learners using cool words in the wrong situation.
That's a good point with the synonyms, and that happens a lot. And I think also my highest level students, what I see is they're very good at seeing reaction of, or my reaction to the reaction of native speakers when they're kind of looking out for it. They're aware. If I kind of like, I don't know, make a face or react a little differently when they say a specific word in a specific context, they might say, would you say that like that? Would you say this word in that situation? So being, you know, like you said, don't like say, okay, the dictionary says this, so it's this. Always be a little bit skeptical.
This is why you need to read a lot. The issue of having the wrong synonym is resolved by reading, because that's where you get the ultimate context from, and you won't even need a dictionary. Now, this brings us to a very important point about reading. If you want to reach advanced levels in your language, no more kids' books, no more stories for 13-year-olds, even my books of short stories. Once you're pushing to an advanced level, you need to cast them aside and read native level books, preferably in genres that you love and topics you love talking about. That is how you get the most difficult, nuanced